Subscribe to our YouTube channel and don't forget to press the bell icon to get all the latest updates.
If you have been hiding under a rock and you missed the big points of this budget, let us take you through it again. This is, of course, India's first post-pandemic budget, and the consensus generally, despite some disagreements, that it has been a safe, solid, pragmatic budget. There could be disagreements on whether it went far enough in its growth strategy. Nirmala Sitharaman was quick to flag the fact that this was a budget undertaken in circumstances like never before. She was also quick to tell us that this is a budget that, of course, got digital, but actually held that red tablet. Many are asking whether this tablet will be the magic pill that in fact is needed to reset and rejig an economy ravaged by COVID. We are going to be asking that question to Dr. Arvind Virmani, one of our best known economists and public intellectuals, and we're going to bring him up in a moment. But if you just want to get a sense of the fiscal deficit, obviously everybody from the economic survey to the left wing to the right wing was calling out for the government to actually spend more. Dr. Virmani is with us. Welcome, sir. Just want to, before I start the conversation with you, look at that fiscal deficit data. The fiscal deficit data is, of course, saying that the fiscal deficit is going to be at 9.5% of the GDP. The economic survey had called for expansionary spending, and the government has done that. When it estimates what's going to happen next year, the FM is explaining why the deficit had to do a sharp deviation from the target for next year of 3%. And the number that we're looking at estimated for next year looks something like this. It stands at 6.8%. If we can now move to this last slide, that's what it tells you, that that's what the estimation is for the fiscal deficit for next year. Pragmatic, prudent, safe is mostly what the government has been called, with some disagreements over whether it went far enough. Let me bring in Dr. Virmani on what he thinks. Your first thoughts.
I think, we had in both our presentations to the FM and the PM at NITI, we had said that the focus of the budget must be on restoring fast growth. And so whatever needed to be done with whether it's reforms, whether it's fisc or anything related to it, that should be the primary focus. And of course, the secondary focus, which was to take care of certain things connected to revival and the lessons from the pandemic which needed to be done, like welfare. I know everybody has been discussing health. So these were the primary and the kind of secondary, the leftover problems, etc., from the pandemic had to be addressed as a secondary measure. But I didn't think that was a huge issue. It was just a short-term 6-month issue.
In terms of sort of the big takeaway, what leaps out at you about the budget, Dr. Virmani?
The way I judge budgets, I've seen, I don't know, probably more than any other person around from inside and outside. There are two things. One is a big idea, and the second is the smaller things. I mean, in context of big idea, other things may look small, but they are needed, especially post-pandemic. So the big idea here was the framework for strategic sale. Several months ago, they had announced, like everybody I heard on the news, that the cabinet has approved this framework, but we didn't know what the details were, strategic industry policy, etc. So the big thing is it's being spelled out, whether loss-making PSUs, the privatization of 2 public sector banks, IDBI, and a number of things which have made it concrete. So it's not just an announcement that we are changing the approach, but then giving, so to say, concrete actions which will assure everybody that now this change has been made. And then very quickly, I'll just go list the things and you can discuss the infrastructure. There are several things, particularly I like this PPP in management infrastructure, but of course, infrastructure everybody was talking about, to stimulate demand, to increase employment competitiveness. Then banking we mentioned, but the ARC, AMC, I myself recall we've been discussing this for, 10 years or 15 years, how to solve the NPA problems. So that has been finally addressed meaning the process has started. Finance, the single securities code, FDI and insurance, and then the welfare aspects, which are very important in my view. Again, I'm very pleased because that's something I had emphasized both my meetings, and I've done it publicly, this whole question of sewage and sanitation.
Yeah. So let's pick up everything one by one, right? Let's first look at the deficit, and whether you believe that actually the government could have afforded to be even more elastic with this number, because I've heard some comments saying that this will not change consumption, that there isn't enough incentivization for in particular the middle or the upper middle class, and therefore the spending needed to be even more. What do you look at? What do you look at?
So I don't agree with the criticism, and let me explain why. The three-stage process, I must mention this because people don't realize we have done 7 research papers on COVID starting from February to August, 1 paper every month. So I'm not just talking off the top of my head looking at the budget. So what we had pointed out that there were 3 stages. One was survival, revival, and then regrowth. Using different words. These words now sound the best. So the revival for 90% of the economy is in process. The 10% which is left is what I call contact services. You know them as hospitality, transport, etc.
Yeah.
So yeah. I had said in my presentation that we need to do a little more on this segment. But I don't think we need to do more in terms of just revival for the rest of the economy. So the 2 things which I emphasize, and of course others have talked about, the main one for the rest of the economy is the infrastructure stimulus. People always think of infrastructure as supply. To me, it is demand. And that 34.5% increase in infra spend and the whole capital budget is enough. I don't think we need to do that. The only lacuna as I see, is, as I said, there are some incentives needed. Again, people don't, because I have done 2 papers on the COVID itself, the spread. There was some incentive needed for putting air filters in, for example, in marriage halls, in cinema halls. That would have accelerated the revival of this segment. Anyway, that is detail. But to answer in the broad sense, I'm not disappointed. I think the focus has been right. Somebody may say 6.7%. 6.6%, okay. I mean, I can't argue at that level, but broadly, I agree with that approach.
Okay, let's look at the taxes. There was some talk of a COVID cess, and that this could have been a moment to actually tax the wealthy. I've had people on the platform all day saying we missed that opportunity. That would have helped the government spend more on the social sector, more on the marginalized, especially when you look at these kind of numbers that have come from the Oxfam inequality report that point to India's billionaires and how their wealth actually increased manifold. Do you believe that it was an appropriate time for a wealth tax or a COVID cess?
Absolutely the wrong time. Again, this is something we have argued for the last 9 months, and the economic survey spelled out. The key, you don't reduce the deficit by, you reduce it short term, you can, but you can kill the economy. So raising taxes at this point means a pro-cyclical policy. That in fiscal terms is the worst thing to do, okay, or to reduce expenditures. Either way, to raise taxes, rates, or to reduce expenditures. What you need, and history has taught us this, that the best way to bring down the debt GDP ratio is by accelerating the growth. This is not just in India, it's across the world. So clearly we needed a pro-cyclical. Now you could say that it's gone from 9.5 to 6.8, you're reducing the deficit. That's not true. Because 9.5 has what we call automatic stabilizers. When the GDP collapsed by 20-something, 25%, the tax revenue went down by more than that. So when it is coming back up to positive, probably in Q3 and 2-3% in Q4, that revenue revives. So there's an automatic adjustment which should not be taken account of. The expenditure has increased. And I think it's increased in the right areas. Now, again, if you go into excruciating detail, somebody may disagree that this is not. But putting a wealth tax just because you're unhappy with billionaires because equity market collapsed and has risen, I think that's absolutely wrong. I completely disagree. I completely disagree with Oxford. They have no knowledge of Indian economy or how to manage it.
So you completely disagree with the Oxfam inequality report that calls for this tax?
For India, I have known, they may be absolutely right on Africa, I don't know, but I know the Indian economy. I have analyzed the unemployment from the CMI data. It doesn't tell me that. It tells me there is a focus need. Large part of that will be addressed by infrastructure spend, which is construction intensive, and a few incentives which have not been given. I mentioned one to you. But I do not agree with this broad approach, which fits everything everywhere in the world. I have always opposed it.
And if you are to principally disagree with it, what would that be? Is it because you think it's anti-growth? Is it because you think it gives the state too much interventionary power? Which one is it?
Absolutely anti-growth. That is the key point is, I can mention the two things if you want to pursue the negative side. I think we still need tax reform, which will help everybody, including MSMEs, etc. And we do need a welfare system reform. I don't believe in these ad hoc measures which come from, because there's inequality in the US, we also have inequality and we must do the same thing they're doing. I'm sorry to be strong. I have opposed this kind of approach for 30 years. It's not today.
Sure. But let's look at the tax announcement, direct and indirect taxes. There are lots of questions from our viewers also. They want to know your take. We had some sort of minor relief for pensioners in terms of compliance, saying that they will not have to, if they're above 75, they won't have to file tax returns. But generally, there was no shake-up in the tax regime. What did you think of the tax measures?
Well, you bring me to the thing which I'm still waiting for. But you can call it disappointed, or you can call it, I expect these to happen in the next 15 months. If they do not happen, I'll be disappointed. I think we need a direct tax code reform. Direct tax code is an ancient code. It has been layer by layer. If you ever read it, I still have the new tax code. It's lying right here in my desk. The current code is like this much. Reduce it to this much. It will help everybody who earns a reasonable income. The poverty part is separate. That also needs to be reformed. So the direct tax code, the GST, it penalizes MSMEs. We still need. It was well intentioned, but it hasn't gone far enough in simplification. So that is pending, and the welfare reform, I think, still needs to be done. Hopefully, it will be done in the next 15 months.
There's some sense that the tax-paying Indian, who self-identifies as a middle-class Indian mostly, never gets anything in any budget. Did you see anything for that salaried class in today's budget?
No, and the reason is precisely this, because you may not remember, but I was there in the 97 tax reform, and the key argument was you simplify, and even guys who pay very little tax benefit, because I have seen many people, I talked to hundreds of people, because people, the incentive for declaration and then earning more income goes up, and we have seen it. The direct tax collections went up. People give more voluntary compliance, and so that's the key. You just giving little sops of taxes, then it doesn't help. It doesn't work. The SOP should be given directly. It should be transferred to your income. That's where that whole welfare system design. So it's part of an integrated system. I don't like these piecemeal things. So, I won't agree with those arguments.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get to one of the other sort of aspects of this budget, which was the referencing to, in fact, the MSP and procurement record. And before you respond, I'm actually just going to play out the finance minister's comments on this, because I think that would make for a more informed discussion. So if we can just play out what Nirmala Sitharaman said, where the government strenuously defended its record on MSP and procurement when it came to wheat and paddy farmers.
Our government is committed to the welfare of farmers. The MSP regime has undergone a sea change to assure price that is at least 1.5 times the cost of production across all commodities. The procurement has also continued to increase at a steady pace. This has resulted in increase in payment to farmers substantially. In case of wheat, the total amount paid to farmers in 2013-14 was 33,874 crores. In 2019-20, it was 62,802 crores. And even better, Honorable Speaker, in 2020-2021, this amount paid to farmers was 75,060 crores.
Now, Dr. Virmani, of course, I know your view on the farm protests and the farm laws, but this intervention by government referencing that the mandi system would continue to have access to agricultural credit and defending its record, this is not really going to assuage the protester on the street. What did you make of this intervention on the farm laws in the farming sector?
I think it was just factual. You're putting out information on MSP expenditures. That should have been on the public record in any case. So how much money has been spent on procurement and MSP related procurement, not the storage, not the interest cost. She's just putting out the separate part of it, because otherwise it all gets buried in the FCI's budget. So to me, that's just a factual data statement for the record. I don't see anything else besides that.
Did you think that the budget was the occasion to try and address the farmers' protests, or not really?
I don't see how. As I said, the objective of the budget is not to deal with protests all over the country. It is to deal with the fisc and the growth, because they are both related. And the primary objective was, but the secondary one, I do want to, before we finish, talk about the Swachh Bharat Mission Urban. I was the first economist when the PM said from the ramparts of August, we don't talk about it. We feel these are dirty things. And I was very happy for that reason alone on August of 2014 or 15. And I want to point out, this is very, very important. There's a disease called environmental entropathy, which makes it difficult. People who live in slums, for example, where there's sewage all over the place, it reduces absorption in the guts of whatever they eat. And that is a major cause of stunting and wasting in India. People keep talking on nutrition. I've done research on this. And this is going to have a tremendous effect. I can promise you, if I'm still alive, you can interview me 10 years from now. The stunting and wasting in slums of India, if you have proper sewage system, is going to go down. And I can take a bet with anybody if this properly implemented, obviously.
Okay. Now, before you actually go, I have a couple of last questions. One, what really pleases you about this budget and what really disappoints you?
Well, disappointing, I've already said. I would expect in the next 15 months more tax reform and reform of the welfare system. I think it needs systemic reform. What pleases me, I pointed out to you that the big reform is that the privatization. It's a reversal of the nationalization, which we have argued about. I have argued against nationalization of the coal structure, which has been done, of the banking, which is starting. And of course, the whole, there are a lot of smaller things, of course, but basically connected with infrastructure, that financing, it's simplification reform. Ultimately, a good reform is simple and effective, and afterwards everybody says it's good, but before they all oppose it. I have 10 years of history of this. Everything we propose, somebody or the other opposed. And 3 years later, when it works, everybody says, I was also kind of in favor of this. so the reforms. Yeah.
Finally, we've been asking people to use like one word, just one word that they think most aptly captures this budget. What would it be for you?
Egro.
Explain.
Economic growth and welfare, a budget for economic growth and welfare, which is our motto.
I learned
which you'll see on my.
All right, you seem pleased, quite pleased with the budget. I think a lot of
input. I identify at least 3 or 4 things which I had suggested. Not that they listened to me. Maybe they were thinking.
Do you want to quickly list those 4 before we say bye to you?
I've already emphasized.
I
the
know,
one
but just
which
recap.
I'm really pleased about
Recap it
is
for
the
us,
sewage and sanitation. As I said,
Yeah.
people, the casteist and approach, which makes people don't want to think about these things. I think that is really, if I'm going to end with a praise, I'm very, very happy, and I congratulate the PM and FM on that.
All right, Dr. Virmani, I think it's the one thing is that it didn't seem like a budget for a crisis. There is a crisis in the economy, but I think the COVID numbers where they stand has also given the government some confidence, would you say, to actually...
Well, 11%, it's there in the projection. That 11% tells you that we are going to recover. And I'm confident we are going to have double-digit growth. Again, maybe in your show or somewhere else, I first made this prediction about 2-3 months ago.
You did. I do remember that. Well, thank you, Dr. Virmani. A pleasure having you on. Glad to be in a good mood and not an angry mood as you sometimes are on the farm.
Well, I'm glad to see you too. You are an old friend from government days. So
long back. Thank you, Arvind. Thank you so much.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.